Welcome to another Apollo Papyrus podcast episode. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For this episode, my interview guest is one of two authors of the personal development book Nobody Cares Until You Do, Living Beyond the Blame, Excuses, and Doubts That Hold You Back, the other author being Salem Thyne. His name is Robert Hunt, and my interview with Robert will follow the teleportation sound. Robert Hunt, welcome to the Apollo Papyrus podcast.
Thank you so much.
Feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners.
I am an executive coach here in the DFW area. I grew up in Southern California, and I moved to Texas in 2010 to start my career and my future over again. And I've been doing executive coaching and running CEO peer groups since 2013, which allows me to live out my purpose in life. So I have a lot of joy doing the work that I do. And in 2020, we took control of our lives, really 2019, and made huge changes that led us to write this book called Nobody Cares Until You Do, that we published in 2022. And it's all about the idea of the freedom and power that comes with a life of accountability. And that is why I'm here today.
Without spoiling too much of the book you co-wrote, Nobody Cares Until You Do, Living Beyond the Blame, Excuses, and Doubts That Hold You Back, what is it about?
Well, it's basically about accountability. Accountability in the simplest terms means you own it. A lot of times we look at the word accountability, we think it's a negative thing, like I'm going to hold you accountable like you're in trouble. But it really is accountability is freedom, because when you take accountability for your life, you gain the power to change anything in your life. But when you stay and live as a victim, everything happens to you. And as a victim, you don't have any power or authority to do anything about it. But we're not victims. We may have been victimized in some areas of our life. I was certainly in the journeys that I've walked through. But you have a choice. Do I stay and live as a victim, or do I press past the challenges that life faces me and I own it? And I go and pursue what I really want my life to be like.
Salem Thyne, did I pronounce his name correctly?
Yes, that is correct.
Was the co-author of Nobody Cares Until You Do. Feel free to tell us more about Salem and what was it like to co-write a book with him?
It was great. He is my friend. He's a great guy. He got a great heart, a brilliant mind. He served in the Navy. He had incredible jobs and incredible career, and has been an entrepreneur who started a couple different companies already, a great friend. And just to be able to bounce the ideas off of each other and tell the stories together. He has a very different perspective on life and business and thinking than I do. And so it's great to be able to have two different perspectives on this topic as we dove in to write the book together. It was a lot of fun.
How long did it take you and Salem to write the book?
Once we committed to work with a publisher, it took us about 3 months. Basically, the publisher coordinated with a ghostwriter. We went out and met with her in June of 2021 and spent a couple days with her talking about our vision and reviewing the stories. We had already created the outline and the stories and the structure of the book, but we knew we were never going to write it. You know, he owns two companies. I have my own business, and we both have kids and family. And we just know if we're going to get this done, we need to hire a professional. So we spent an awful lot of money to do that, but it was because we wanted to tell the story and help people get past the things that hold them back. And this publishing company did a good job. They were very expensive, but they earned their keep. And they created our website and got us published and get it into Barnes and Nobles and Amazon and Walmart and all that good stuff. And they did a great job with the design of the book. So all in all, about a year process. But once we committed to it and started work with a ghostwriter, it really took us about 3 months to work through that. And then in the summer, it was pretty much done by the early summer of 22, and it came out in September 22.
Okay, what was the name of the publisher? And was this a hybrid publisher or a different type of publisher?
No, it's a full-born publisher, Advantage Media. They're out of South Carolina, and they're their partnership with Forbes. So they've got a lot of power behind them.
Do you have any plans on writing a book as a solo author in the future? And if so, what are some ideas you have for a book that you might write as a solo author?
Yeah, I don't have any vision of doing another book at this time. We think that it would be interesting to write some small booklets that would be kind of like where you do computers for dummies, but it would be accountability for dummies, and it would just be taking some of the categories that we've seen people struggle with, like if you're overweight, it would be okay. So you're fat. Who cares? Nobody cares. Do something about it. Or if you're broke, so you're broke. Nobody cares. Do something about it. So I think there's this idea that there are things in our lives that are very common to most people that we could write some smaller books about. But at this point, we're just doing more social media posts and articles and videos and tell the story. And I think we got pretty busy trying to continue to promote this book.
You're a consultant in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. What is it like to work as a consultant in the Metroplex?
Well, to be clear, I'm a coach, which is different than a consultant. In my experience, a consultant comes in and tells you what to do. They look at what you've got going and they tell you what to do. And there are some great consultants out there who have years of experience and can see what is wrong with your business and tell you what you should do. An executive coach, which is what I am, we ask you what you want to do, and then we help you get started on that. I believe that most leaders already know what to do. They're just not getting it done. It's kind of like, I know I should floss my teeth every day, but sometimes I don't. I know I should eat less bags of chips at night, but sometimes I don't. There's all these things that we know we should do, but we don't do them. And that's the problem, is we got to figure out why. And sometimes we're too emotionally close to the problem or the issue to make a really balanced decision. We have a lot of unconscious bias that affects how we act. So having someone who has no emotion attached to your issues or your problems sit and listen and see what's going on and help you is what I do. It's kind of like a great golfer like Tiger Woods did not need someone to tell him what to do, but his coach would say, hey, you said you want to keep your elbow down when you're swinging, but it's up in the air. I want to let you know that. And they see things that you don't always see, and they're just helping you to refine what you're already doing. That's what I do.
What does it mean to be accountable in life?
In the simplest terms, it's the idea that you own it. So when you look at your life and you have anything at all that you would want to blame or make excuses or say, I can't do anything about it, or just wait and hope it gets better, that is playing the role of a victim. To be accountable means you look at that and go, okay, I don't like that. What am I going to do about it? And so in order to really know if you're being a victim or not, or to play that role, or if you know to help you see where you could take ownership and change your life, we put a satisfaction assessment in the book. The book's more like a workbook than anything. It tells stories and moves you along a series of learnings, but we want you to put it into play. We want you to read it and do something, read it and do something. And so the assessment that's in the book, it's at the end of the first chapter, is designed for you to be honest with yourself and say, when I look at my life and my business, which is the majority of what we do, in the different categories of those two, how satisfied are you? Because satisfaction creates energy. And where you're not satisfied, you feel tired and exhausted and burned out and disappointed with life. So when you take the satisfaction assessment, you can look at that and go, okay, in my finances, I'm not happy. When it comes to fun and recreation, I'm not happy. When it comes to living out my faith, I'm not happy. And then when you score those things, then you can say, okay, now why? And that's where you have the chance to be accountable. You can say, well, that's because of my parents. They didn't love me, or I have a bad boss. Well, you're blaming someone, or you're making an excuse, or you're saying I can't do anything about that, or you're just waiting and hoping that it might get better someday. All those excuses keep you as a victim. But when you get to this point in your life where you say to yourself, wait, nobody cares until I do. And when you say that to yourself, it's that turning point where you decide, okay, what am I going to do about this? And that's where you are accountable. It's where you start the journey towards the life that you really want.
What are the steps to being accountable, and what are the benefits of being more accountable?
The first step is to acknowledge where you are. Take an assessment test, speak truth about it. Sometimes we delude ourselves by not really owning the thought processes that go through our head. The first step is just to do a little reality check and say, okay, where am I? And then when you get to that place where you really want to change, and then we always say that when the pain of where you are is worse than the pain of where you're going to go, you'll change. And so if you look at your life in any category and you don't like it, then once you've assessed it, you don't like it, then the step is to recognize, okay, I have the power to do something about it, and I'm not going to wait any longer. I'm going to go get going. So once you've done that and you've decided you want to own it, you acknowledge the reality of where you are. You embrace the suck, which is all these are all chapters in the book. You embrace the suck that it might be hard to change. And then you find a solution and you make it happen. And that's the process. And it sounds simplistic. There's a lot of work that goes into there. But I could tell you from my own story, my beautiful wife, Kathy, and I were $90,000 into debt in 2019. And that did not include the house or the cars. And we were not happy with our lives. We kept thinking maybe next year business would turn around. We'd be able to get the money to pay down the debt. But year after year, it just got worse and grew more and more. And so we stopped making excuses or blaming the economy or being angry at God or saying we can't do anything about it. We owned it and we decided to sell our house and start over. So we had a beautiful home, 3,500 square foot home with a movie theater upstairs and lots of room to entertain. And it was beautiful, but we couldn't afford it. And we had built up equity in it. And that was the acknowledged reality part. Hey, there's enough money in this house to get us out of debt right now. And so we put it on the market, hired a real estate agent, and got the house sold by March of 2020 and moved into this rental that we live in now. It's small, but it's lovely. And we paid off everything in April of 2020 and we started over. And it was beautiful. It was peace. It was freedom. And it was hard, but it's also hard to live as a victim. You get to choose your hard, whether you decide to stay in the prison of victim mindset or you go through the hard things of changing your life. And we saw that as on the other side of that long journey, that there was joy and peace and hope. And so now we apply that to every area of our lives, our marriage, our faith, our health, continuing to look for ways that we're not satisfied with something. Let's own it. Let's do something about it.
How can employers make their employees accountable in the workplace?
Yeah, we always say that no one can hold anyone accountable. I can't hold anyone accountable. Employers can't hold their employees accountable. They can ask them to be accountable and they can model accountability by the way they live their life. But at the end of the day, the employee has to want to be accountable. And I've met people who say, well, I hold my people accountable. And I ask them, well, explain that. And they say, well, if they don't do something, then I talk to them about it. Well, that's not really holding them accountable because if they're supposed to do the job and they don't do the job and all you do is talk to them, nothing changes. And if you just go around firing every employee who doesn't do everything you've asked them to do, you'd have no employees. So the only way to really truly have them be accountable is to create a world where they want to do what they're supposed to do. And so even if you fired them, they'd take their lack of accountability and go to the next company. You're the one being accountable. They're still unaccountable. They just moved on. So what you've got to do is you've got to create a world, whether it's your business or your family, where you model accountability, where you own it. You don't make excuses. You don't blame other people. You don't say you can't do anything about it. You own the process and you do it. And if you model it and you model it consistently, then the people around you will want to do it because they'll see the great results you're having and they'll want what you have. And if you have people who just truly aren't accountable, you're not going to change them. You either need to move them out of your company and let them go somewhere else, or you have to model enough that they buy into it. But if they don't want to do it, they're not going to do it. And you've just got to find someone else who will.
My last question for this interview, how can one define his or her purpose in life?
There's a good book out there called Dare to Serve Leadership by Cheryl Batchelder. She was the CEO of Popeye's Chicken, turned around that franchise, did a great job teaching leadership principles that are servant leadership. And in the back of that book, she writes an outline of how to define your personal purpose. It's the best one I've ever seen. And it's what I use when I take my clients through defining their personal purpose in life. It's very easy to understand. It's basically a combination of your life map, what you've gone through, because all the stuff I've gone through in my life makes me who I am today. Same with you. And you take your life map and then you take your values and your strengths and you really spend time thinking about, well, what are my values and what am I really good at? What has God gifted me with that I could use in this world? And the combination of all three of those things is where you find your purpose. And when you know your purpose, it's very powerful because I make decisions in light of my purpose. If I have two really good decisions in front of me, how do I choose which is the right one to do? Well, the one that aligns most with my purpose is the one I should chase because that's the one I'm going to be best at. I'm going to be good at it, but it's also going to be a lot more fun. I'm going to enjoy my life more. So it is very attainable to define your purpose. And I encourage everyone to seek to understand their purpose because there's great joy in doing a job or a career or a life where you're actually living out your purpose.
Robert, thank you for appearing on the Apollo Papyrus podcast. You were an amazing guest.
Oh, you're very kind. Thank you so much.
It was wonderful to interview Robert, and I hope to be able to read the book he and Salem wrote. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to find your writing and reading purpose. Have a safe and happy holiday season. Copyright 2024, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited, except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.